Hello, what's going on? This is a follow-up to the previous Getting Started video. This one we will be covering stroke, fill, and windows. And stroke and fill are fairly easy. All shapes are made with a stroke and a fill in mind, whether visible or not. Strokes are just color and weight given to the pathway created either by the pen tool, the shape tool, or otherwise. Text has it, everything here has it, based on the merit of how vector graphics work. Fill is simply the area inside of a pathway, and it can be within a complete pathway or within an incomplete pathway. As we can see here, we'll go back and use our Shift-C tool to expand this line and give it some weight. There we go, we gave it a fill and it is filled in, and then even though there's not a line there, that is the most direct point from A to B, so that's where it stops filling in. It doesn't fill in beyond that, the way that it would if you were to use the fill bucket in, say, Paint or Photoshop. And that's about the extent of that. You can do the same thing with stroke as you can with your fill and just have little outlines. Ooh. Now, on to windows. Windows are the way that you interact with and alter anything in the settings of a given object within Illustrator. An example of this would be, let's bring up two windows, transform and stroke. We're going to take this and we're going to use this window, stroke, which just affects, it's just a window to affect the weight of the stroke of an item, and we're going to give this a nice thick stroke, about 10. That is its entire function until we pull that out, in which case we can see its more advanced functions. We'll get into that in just a second, because there's actually a better way to do both of these. This is the transform tool. It has all of your types of transformation, rotate, shear, X and Y, width and height, etc., etc. This one I do like to have because you can do stuff like this, you can do stuff like this, but we'll get back to why I use this so rarely in a moment. I have my windows set up in a way that's really to my liking. I took the time to set them all up on the right side here, which is more or less the default, but there is some freedom to it. You can take these out as needed, place them in as needed, organize them. This is a whole layer of them. Oop. Oh no. A little bit of a clerical error there. You can minimize them, get them out of the way when you don't need them, have the ones always up that you like to always have up. Give them a hierarchy based off of your needs, and I think that's a great tip for anyone using Illustrator, is once you get your head in the game and you kind of know what you're doing a bit, don't be afraid to make the program your program rather than Adobe's. Really personalize it to your needs, because they gave you the freedom to do so. You may as well take advantage of it. Now, the first thing that we're going to go over is the properties window, which is, I'm going to call my favorite window because it makes my life so easy. And it does that by effectively being my transform, my stroke and fill and opacity, and my alignment tool, as well as a couple others if you meet a couple criteria to do so. But it combines several different windows into one easier to use window because all of these kind of fall into the same category of placement. Now, we have this red shape here, and we're going to give it a stroke, and we're going to go back to properties. Again, apologies for my voice. Sorry. And we're going to give this an outline of cyan. And we're going to set that to 3. We can then click our stroke, and it gives us a couple options to say round the corners. Circles don't have corners, but let's say we wanted our stroke to align to the inside of our path. Now, no matter how thick we make our stroke, our shape will remain the same ultimate size. Or let's say we want our stroke to actively get bigger because we want to make it bigger, but we like where our fill is. We can put it purely on the outside, or the default, where it goes and bleeds out from either side of the path. It's very powerful stuff. It's very useful. You also have your opacity tool here and a way to change your fill. You have all of your transformation tools here, as well as alignment tools. Very straightforward to use. I absolutely adore this. It's so useful to have. Next up on the chopping block is layers, and I think the best way to describe how to use layers would be to make a mock-up of a composition that I've already done, just very quickly recreate it. So I'm going to make a nice simple shape here, and I'm going to rush through this a little bit, and I'm going to go into my colors with my fill selected, and I'm going to just pick something close to white. And there are 2 ways to do color. Color you can do here, which I will do sometimes, or you can just double click here and get exactly what you need. And really the only difference between the two preference wise is whether or not you're wanting to adjust color, or if you're like adjust within a color, or if you want to change a color. At least that's how I rationalize it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to set this to a nice grayish color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another item here and just kind of overlap it, and I will make this a much darker gray and maybe give it a little bit of an orange warmth to it. Now, I like that, but I also will admit I like this line better, the angle of it and the placement of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here and I'm going to name this background, and I'm going to open this layer up, and you can see both of the items that I made and then which one's on top of which. I am going to reverse those to where this one is on top of this one. And then that's all I really need for the background. I'm going to lock it. Now, if I were to take my selection tool, I cannot do anything with these. I can now make another layer and name it text. And we'll just throw in some text right quick. I won't actually do anything with it beyond just making it making it Comic Sans to make my professor mad. And we'll do that and just leave it be and say that that's our intent and that we're happy with it. Now, what we can do next is, let's say I'll just use a square instead of an asset, and say that we wanted to put a picture here, and that our picture would be something to the effect of this color. Ew. This color. Not much better, but that's our picture. We have that. Now let's say that we wanted to take this and kind of have it where the picture was here. It's not that important. The text kind of bleeds on over into it. What we can do is take our text, take the shape, put it in another layer, and put that layer behind the text. And what we'll call this image, we'll call it image. We'll do something like this. And then suddenly you realize that you can control the... Well, that is odd. Hold on. I think I put a layer inside of a layer. There we go. You have a hierarchy on what you, with control to what you can lock up and edit freely, and then have security in knowing that things are in front of others based off of the merit of what they are rather than the order that you've placed them. It gives you more freedom and more control over your own composition through organization. By the nature of how this program works, you work back to front for the most part. So it's a healthy habit to picture this almost like scrapbooking paper of layering sheets of construction paper on top of one another. And this is just a healthy way to keep track of what's sitting on top of what. The layers tool is very useful. It's very intuitive. And while it's entirely possible to make a composition all within one layer just by keeping up with everything, even if it was incredibly complex, you're not benefiting yourself by doing it, because if you leave that alone for, say, 3 weeks and then come back to it, you've forgotten everything that you've done, and suddenly you're just looking at a big mess of singularly color-coded assets all jumbled together, and no way of knowing what you want to do or how to do it, nothing locked up to make your life easier. Use your layers tool. The last one that we'll go over is our artboard, which works very similarly to the layers tool in that you can just add another artboard as needed. You can also delete them as needed, as I stated in the previous video. You can create more, you can name them as needed. You can also, I will throw in a freebie of a tool, the Artboard tool, which has the shortcut of Shift+O, which allows you to change the dimensions of an artboard. If you double click an artboard, you can also change them with a little more finesse by using the power of numbers. Let's say I wanted something 12 by 10, and let's put that at like a nice 18. Okay, never mind. And do that. There, now we have a nice, precise, out of the way artboard, and even though we have an asset bleeding onto it, that is something that we can fix pretty easily by just moving it to the side. And those are all of the really essential windows. The properties, the layers, color, which again is even itself a little bit optional because you have your fill and stroke, which, by the way, you can swap your fill and stroke at any moment by hitting this, and you can switch between whether you have your fill or stroke selected by hitting X. Let me make sure I'm not lying to you right quick. Yeah, that's the truth. That was an honest statement. But yeah, properties, layers, color, which again, optional, but I like to use it sometimes, and then artboards. In the next video, what we will be talking about is the first of our intermediate tools, which is the gradient tool, which will expand on fills and stroke. Until then, hope you've learned something.